If you were a perfectly moral and all-powerful creator god, what kind of universe would you make? For one, I'd make chocolate really healthy. Imagine a world where chocolate tasted just as good as it does today, but it was a health food. Much like the campaign promises of any populist politician, I'd make life great for everyone, such that everyone is in a state of superb bliss all of the time. The world that I'd make would resemble utopia and be the very height of well-being. I'd make dragons. They seem cool. But you know what I would not make? Diseases that kill millions of children every year. However, according to the World Health Organization, nearly 9 million children under the age of 5 die every year, according to 2007 figures. Around 70% of these early child deaths are due to conditions that could be prevented or treated with access to simple, affordable interventions. That's over 24,000 children under the age of 5 dying every day. Any designer who would make such pernicious evils in the universe is far from a perfect creator. And yet religious people would have you believe that a perfect god thought that a universe would be better if it included malaria, flesh-eating parasites that eat infants' eyes, and other hideous diseases. In this video, I will demonstrate that the problem of evil is a damning, pun intended, problem for any religion that posits a perfect deity who created the universe. If there are better ways to design the universe, then it follows that the universe wasn't designed by the best of all possible designers. The first thing that theists will say when confronted with the problem of evil is something along the lines of, "Who are you to question God?" This argument has a variety of problems. For one, this begs the question by asserting that God exists. I'm denying that God exists because God's existence doesn't square with the reality of massive unnecessary evil in the universe. Second, this argument is pseudoscientific and contradicts every argument for God. If physical realities such as fine-tuning and cosmology confirm God, as religious people suggest, then physical realities such as children dying should disconfirm God. This argument would end the debate and make all evidence irrelevant because it's possible that there's some explanation out there for evil. The inability of religious people to provide any reasonable explanation of evil makes it exceptionally unlikely that God has some morally sufficient reason for evil, but he just won't tell us what it is. And if this type of argument can fly, then an atheist can use the same type of argument to refute any theistic argument. It would be absurd to respond to the fine-tuning argument with, well, maybe there's some explanation for fine-tuning, but who are you to question the fine-tuning of the universe? This argument is analogous to, maybe God has some explanation for evil, but I won't tell you what it is. Another common objection to the problem of evil is the appeal to free will, saying that in a perfect universe, we would have no free will to do evil. However, this argument also has a number of flaws. First and foremost, this doesn't explain natural evil. A world without malaria and flesh-eating parasites would not be a world devoid of free will. All of the potential improvements that I described at the beginning of this video would not compromise free will. Second, we don't have free will on the theistic worldview because God knows how the entire history of the universe will play out. A third common objection to this argument is that God has a morally sufficient reason for evil. Any instance of evil has some justification that makes it justified. However, this argument has fatal flaws. First of all, there's an incredibly strong evidentiary case against a morally sufficient reason for evil, given the level of evil in the universe. There may be a justification for some limited level of evil in the universe, but a level of evil so great that millions of children die every year is greater than the level of evil that God has a morally sufficient reason for. Second, this argument makes no sense in the context of an omnipotent being. The idea of a morally sufficient reason for evil is that something exists and is bad, but is necessary for some greater good. However, if you're an omnipotent God, you can achieve the greater good with a wave of the magic wand. You can't appeal to something being bad but necessary for a greater good, because an omnipotent God doesn't need the bad thing to create the greater good. If, for example, the justification for malaria is it gives humanity knowledge, a perfect God could give us the knowledge without requiring millions of babies to die. Third and finally, this argument has an absurd conclusion. According to this argument, the world is better because it has malaria in it, such that a world designed to not have malaria in it would be worse. If this is true, then efforts to eradicate malaria must be immoral, because a world without malaria would be a worse world. If the world that God makes is perfect, then it couldn't be improved, which would mean any human effort to improve the world would just make things worse. The final argument that I'll address here is the common response that good cannot exist without evil. However, this argument is not made by an omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent creator, which is to say, this argument is far from perfect. I've never heard a justification provided for this argument. Well, it's true that the way our brains work right now, we generally appreciate things that we were previously deprived of, i.e. water is only truly appreciated when one was previously thirsty. There's no reason why that has to be the case. God could make creations able to appreciate good without evil and give them vastly better lives. Second, and more importantly, this does not explain numerous specific instances of evil in the universe. Children dying of malaria is bad. We could appreciate good without knowing about children dying of malaria or being displaced by tornadoes. Ultimately, having watched and read hundreds of explanations of the problem of evil, I've yet to hear any reasonable explanation given by a Christian of why there are so many design flaws in the universe. And yet, all too often, I see atheists inadequately deploy this argument and fail to adequately answer the arguments provided by theists. This argument, when adequately deployed, single-handedly defeats theism. So let's adequately deploy it as atheists. Given that there's not a perfect God, we as people have the obligation to do good. We have the obligation to eradicate malaria and help other people. We have the obligation to make chocolate healthy. Thanks for watching. Oh, and also like, comment, and subscribe. You know the deal.